Dr. Mix. Hi, and welcome to episode 2 of the podcast from Dr. Mix. And today we talk about mixing drums. We always try to aim for 30 minutes, but we'll see where this is going. So let's introduce Aaron.
Hi, I'm Aaron. I'm the junior sound engineer.
And Dom.
Hi, I'm Dom. I'm producer and senior engineer here.
And your signature salute is...
Hello.
That's good.
Dude, that's low.
All right, end of comedy. It's been a quite interesting week. We've been working on lots of music. We've been producing a couple of remixes, which is great. We won't tell who that is, but we're going to have some new stuff coming out soon. And thanks so much for the great feedback on the past podcast. We've got bombarded with questions, didn't we, Aaron?
Yeah, we got loads that have come in. It's been quite tough sifting through them.
Yeah, exactly. So, forgive if we can't answer to all of them. Most of them are just great questions. We should try and find the time to answer all of them. Anyway, let's dive right into it. How to mix drums. Of course, there is lots to talk about when it comes to drums. We will try and cover as much as possible. I would say first, let's talk about styles. Dom, how is it different when you have electronic drums or acoustic drums?
Well, it's completely different. It's a different world. Because, when you have acoustic drums, you need to take care of everything. You need to take care of, the mics, if you have spillage, if you have, your overheads are well recorded, you need to make sure that, everything is in phase. Lots of things to consider before you even start mixing. But, with electronic drums, it's a bit more straightforward, but it's as hard to get a good sound, I think.
Right, yeah. It is a lot about balance. In fact, we will go first with acoustic drums because they are the most complicated to explain. So, firstly, yes, you have that problem. You have multiple microphones and they might not match exactly. So the first thing to do, probably what I do personally, is I just try to match all of the positions of each mic, because the most sound is pretty much on the overheads, as far as I am concerned. So when you have, that stereo image, you try to match for the snare drum, the kick drum should be in the center. So we'll leave that out. But, the snare drum should match exactly where it's positioned in the overheads. So what I tend to do is I put headphones on and I try and see exactly where the snare drum is on the overheads. And then I try to pan the direct microphone to match exactly the same position so that I get a bit more focus and a bit more consistency. Same is for the toms. Of course, when they come in, they are positioned in the stereo panorama, that's what it stands for. And so you really want to make sure that the tom correspond to the exact same placement as the overheads. Because most of the sounds is in the overheads. And another thing to consider is how are you going to mix it? You're going to mix it from a perspective of the musician or from the perspective of the public. So if, say, the drummer is normal right-handed drummer, then Dom is left-handed. I didn't mean disrespect to left-handed people.
This is
discrimination. Sorry. No, but most drums, I get from the drum's perspective, the hi-hat would be on the left side. So I try to match exactly where the hi-hat is, and then I decide to place it in the mix. And how do you like to mix, Dom?
Well, it depends on how it's recorded sometimes, but I tend to go from the drummer's perspective.
Me too.
Yeah.
How about you, Aaron?
Yeah, exactly the same.
Yeah, because we're musicians.
Yeah. Who cares about the public? It's it's all about the musician.
That's right. So also, as a general attitude, what am I trying to say with this drum? So where are they placed? So is it maybe a jazz tune? So maybe should it be located in a jazz club? So that's going to determine what kind of choices I make in terms of reverb, for example. So it's about telling the story of the song. So wherever I am gonna make a decision, it should be consistent with what I'm trying to say with the song. So if it's like, I can place the drums in a big arena, of course I can, we're talking about simulating that in a big arena, or maybe in a church, or maybe in a bathroom. It depends on what the song is and what the song is trying to say.
Also, sometimes it's interesting how you place the drums. I mean, we have this nice client of ours, Laurie, who likes to place the drums on one channel,
side.
One
Yeah.
side. So it's like Beatles and old stuff. So it's it's really what you want to convey.
I love that.
Yeah, it's great.
Yeah, I think it's a really, really cool effect because his songs are very much that sort of vibe, and he wants to keep it that vibe. So he goes with that, and it works really well.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, of course, and it goes along with, your mixing choices. So with music, we are trying to tell a story. So we try to make sure that story is consistent so that it delivers the message of the song. So shall we dive into the kick drum? So firstly, how loud should the kick drum be? It should be loud. No, the quick answer is should be as loud as necessary to keep the groove going. And if it's a house track, it probably has to be very loud. And if it's a hip-hop track, probably it's got to be very loud. Right. In other genres, it may vary a little bit. Okay, how do we make that kick drum loud if we need it to be loud and powerful? Dom.
Well, we have to go back to our first podcast, to be honest. I mean, if you haven't listened to it, go and listen to it. It's really nice. I think the kick drum is the one that determines how loud you have to mix the rest of the song, because it has the most, power because of the low frequencies, and it's a very prominent element of the mix. So, I mean, as we said in the previous episode, when you mix your kick drum first, and you make sure that you have still like 12 dBs of headroom on your master bus, then everything else will blend in nicely and you won't overload your master bus. So I think the kick drum is like the starting point of how you can build your mix around it.
Right.
So
right. I have a couple.
I mean, it depends. I mean, it most of the times it's quite loud. I mean, it's not very loud on jazz mixes, but I wouldn't know that because you do them all the time.
Good point. Okay, so it's true.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, what to do
Truth be told.
Truth to be told. What do we do when it's not powerful enough? Okay, number one trick. We do parallel compression. We basically create a parallel channel where, like a copy, which is phase coherent. Make sure that your system has latency compensation for that, so that you're sure that everything is in phase. We basically squash the heck out of it, and then because when you squash the heck out of it with a compressor, it loses most of its low end. As a direct result, we just put it back with a Pultec style EQ. It could be anything. It could be our Fat Bastard, which has a great low end control. It could be whatever you can put your hands on. Just crank up the low end, and then at that point you have a very powerful version of that bass drum that is pretty much about low end. So you sneak that in, and it becomes powerful. Now, to the same effect, you can do that with the mid frequencies. So basically, you can take another copy, effectively, of the bass drum, and you can just take out the low end and the top end, and you just filter out everything, and you just compress the heck out of it, and maybe you add some saturation, something that makes it nice and punchy.
Distressor comes to mind.
Comes to mind. Or
Distressor, the Mazalek works great with that.
The Mazalek, yeah. If you need
EQ, if you want to make your parallel channel more beefy, and also on the plugin side, we really tend to use the EQ lately.
Yes,
which is great for adding lots of punch to the drums. And also we tend to use a lot the multiband envelope shaper in Cubase.
Oh yes,
because it allows you to enhance the transients in different regions.
Yeah.
So that's incredible.
Yeah,
I don't know of any other plugin that does that so well.
When we do that, we are very careful about the phase, because
Yeah.
sometimes that can introduce phase issues. So be
That's
careful
correct.
when you use transient designers on the kick drum or on the drums in general, because then when you pair it to the rest of the channels or maybe the overheads or whatever you have, you might have problems. We're always very careful.
That's why we do it always on the bus.
Yes.
So
Yeah,
you
yeah,
know,
exactly.
We have our kick drum channel, our parallel channel. They're going all to a bus, and then we use the transient shaper. So.
Exactly. Then we have the second level of trickery, which happens to be what we do when you get the rhythm edit option on the mixing and mastering packages. This is one option that takes a bit longer, takes a bit of work, of course, and that's using Trigger 2 by Steven Slate. Aaron, why don't you tell us about it?
Yeah, we use either Trigger or we use Cubase's note to MIDI function, which basically maps out where the kick drum's played, and it allows us to then go through our extensive sample libraries and find a great kick that will either complement the kick that we already have and fill in what's missing, or we will just totally replace it if that's what we feel is required. And obviously these samples are built in sort of like perfect conditions and they're really well recorded, which is very hard to come by when you're just recording yourself maybe at home or you've rented a studio for a couple of days. And it allows us to get results which you probably couldn't otherwise without spending a hell of a lot of money.
Exactly. Another thing to be careful of is the phase. And what is the advantage of using Trigger versus just basically manually triggering it?
Well, Trigger has fantastic phase correlation. It always lines the transient of the kick or the snare, whatever you're replacing, up very, very accurately, and you tend to get very, very good results. When you're doing it with MIDI, the results can be good, but you always have to double check it.
Sometimes you have to, nudge a kick drum for every single hit. So just to replace the kick drum, it might take like 2 hours of editing.
Yeah,
So
I remember you doing that recently.
Yeah.
We're not happy.
No, it wasn't.
Of course, the thing is that there is no silver bullet for this. You have to get your hands dirty, look exactly what's inside the track, and try the best way to enhance it. And that's why we have the rhythm edit option, and that's why it costs a little bit more, because we dedicate a lot of time to making sure that your drums are just great. So this podcast could take forever. So let's move quickly to the snare drum. Now, the snare drum, the most important thing is it's got to be balanced against the bass drum. So typically, music can be very different, but what typically tends to happen, you got your bass drum on 1 and 3, or 1, 2, 3, and 4, and then you've got your snare drum on 2 and 4. So you kind of have this relationship, and you have to find that good balance between the two things. Now, if you got a nice powerful kick drum, you probably want a nice and powerful snare drum to pair it. And of course, it's got to do with compression. We tend to use fairly slow attack times, meaning 10, maybe 20, something around like that. Of course, it depends again on the song, but what we're trying to get is a bit of that snap, but also a bit of body, so that the snare drum cannot get lost in the mix. What tricks do you do, Dom, to make the snare drum sound cool?
Well, again, parallel compression, very important. A thing that you have to consider straight away is the actual frequencies that you have to enhance. So basically, you have to remove everything that's not pleasant, like ringing, some resonances. So for this, we use very surgical EQs. Most of the times they are plugins, because plugins are better for that, in my opinion. So basically, we cut out all the annoying frequencies that ring out, and basically they make your snare sound, amateurish.
That's right.
So that's the first thing. Then, of course, transient designers, transient enhancers, compression, also saturation. So just a bit of distortion on the parallel channel will make a world of a difference. For example, a plugin that comes to mind is Decapitator or Devlock, which is our latest favorite.
And then, of course, we can still resort to samples to enhance it. Now, bear in mind that in specific genres like metal, it's always sample layering all the time. So on specific genres, we can't do without using samples. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's right. Also, because these samples, they've taken so much time to create them. So they might be working on a snare for like, I don't know, a day, running it through parallel channels, different compressors, different EQs, reverb units, and then you get one sample. So, I mean, of course, it's great if you can use those samples. And if you have good samples, then, for rock and metal, it's, you can't just not use samples.
Yeah, everyone's using them. You can hear them everywhere.
That's quite right. And now I will go quickly through the rest. So hi-hats, just get it right. Remember that the hi-hat is the one that sometimes drives the whole of the groove, especially if it's like, it's not all about the kick and the snare. The hi-hat can deliver the movement of the groove. So that's very important to get right. And sometimes it sounds a bit harsh. If that happens, you can EQ out things, but also you can use a de-esser. That's a very clever way of doing it, especially if you've got that sort of so where the open hi-hat might be ringing a lot more than the close hi-hat. So by using a de-esser, you kind of make it all nice and even so that it drives the rhythm in a more pleasant way. Oh, we have to talk about the ambience, right? So, the ambient microphone. I mean, of course, we are assuming that the drums are recorded well, but most of the times, it's...
They're not.
They're not.
Let's be honest.
Let's be honest. A lot of times, but even when they're recorded in good studios, sometimes, a lot of times they don't get it right. So, in any case, most of the drums will come with ambience. So, what is an ambient microphone, Dom, and what do we do to it?
Well, I mean, room microphones is a very important part of the, the sound.
Especially for rock, right?
Yeah, rock music, but even jazz. I mean, it's because it gives you like the sense of space. So, I mean, in rock music, we tend to distort or really squash the room microphones so that you get a bigger sound. It's very, very interesting how it can really transform the sound of your drum kit when you really compress a lot the room microphones and add a bit of saturation to them. So your snare becomes bigger, everything has a bit more sustain, so you don't have this very tight drum sound. You get a bit bigger but without adding reverb. Right. Which is great. Because with reverbs, you can go very quickly, you can go into the 80s territory. The room mics are a really, really nice ingredient to the sound.
That's right.
If you treat them right.
And the first compressors that comes to mind, I would say 1176, Distressor.
Yeah, distressors.
What else?
There's loads. Room mics on rock, I reckon, is probably the most fun thing to mix. Because you just get to go, I've got this new compressor, let's smash it and take it to extremes.
Yeah.
And it's always a fun time.
And the things that you can do that with the ambience microphone, you can't do it as much with the overheads because your cymbals would become pretty much just unusable.
Or they will go.
Exactly. Wait.
Dude, that's low.
This is a dude that's low moment because that imitation wasn't quite something. Anyway, okay. Moment comedy is gone. Let's move on to the master bus, not to the mix bus for the drums. One of the things is you have your whole drums. Now you've got your nice balance. You've done your improvements, and now you want this to become one fader, just one fader, because essentially it's gonna be easier to mix, and also you will be able to ride the channel better. For example, you have that sort of drum fill that you want to enhance, so you can just drive the whole drums a little bit louder in that specific place without having to, touch on 10 different channels. So that's a very good thing. The other very good thing is that it offers you a chance to reinforce the sound. So you can maybe compress it a little bit more, which means you can get it a bit more compact. And a typical compressor would be the SSL compressor, the bus compressor. If it's different, distressor again works really well. In general, FET type of
The API 2500.
API
great.
2500, amazing for drums. So I mean, it's a lot of fun. That's one of the nice parts. And also, what happens is that you use different compressors not only to apply gain reduction, but also to give a little bit of taste, a little bit of color. Because if you give a different color, then your ear will be able to detect the drums a little bit better in the mix. So say that I have, for example, the SSL compressor, which has a very mid sort of presence to it. So the drums will have that color. And maybe another bus, like the keyboards, will have a different color. Maybe you're using, on the strings, you're using 33609, the Neve compressor, because it's very lush. So not only it's different sounds, but it's also different colors and different textures, which will help the ear distinguish between one instrument and the other. So another thing that, of course, it allows you to achieve loudness a bit easier. And one trick, of course, is using the Fletcher Munson curve. You can push a little bit the mids with an equalizer. Do you do that, Dom?
Oh yeah, lots. I mean, it's all about perception. I would say one more thing that we do in the master bus when we get there and we feel that the drums have sometimes you get the attack but you don't get the body. Then as an additional thing, we parallel the whole bus.
That's right.
And just add just a bit of it, not too much, but immediately you get like lots of sustain and body, and your drums sound like a real instrument, not like transients. Let's go. Not like that. So they sound like meaty and they have substance. So they blend well with the mix.
Yeah. And this goes to what we were saying on the podcast before. You want to add layers of compression as you progress towards the mix bus. So don't expect to just compress everything in one go and everything's gonna be just fine. No, it doesn't happen like that. Compression should be used with tastes and gradually, so bit by bit. Do you find that, Aaron, when you build your mixes?
Yeah, absolutely. I feel if you sort of try and smash it all in one go, it doesn't like that at all. It sort of will react very horribly. Whereas if you sort of gradually build up on it, you can do as much compression but in stages, and the material will react better to that.
Yeah. And one mistake that most people do when they're starting to mix drums is when they get their heads around compression, they either compress them so much that they lose all the transients, or they enhance the transients so much that basically your mix bus is going to overload, and basically you just get a very attacky sound with no sustain.
Right.
So basically in the context of a mix, you lose all the drum sounds and you just get these clicky, attacky sounds.
Right.
These are like, it's either that or the other one. But I think the middle ground is, the best way to do it.
Yep.
And this can be achieved only using all those techniques.
Fantastic. So, we should talk about this forever, but in any case, you can email your questions to questions@drmix.com, and of course, there are a lot of implications to what we're saying because the way we prepare the drums will have a dramatic effect on the final master, on the final mix, and also the decisions that we take here will also affect what the mastering guy is doing in the end. So yeah, lots to talk about. But I think we've gotten to that point where we can answer some of our public's questions. Q&A time. All right, Aaron, what have we got?
Yep, we've had loads of questions again this week, and our first one comes from Morten Bethellison, who asks, do you high pass in mastering, and if so, do you have any rules or suggestions on where to set the filter?
Do you high pass in mastering, Don?
Well, we do, but very carefully. I mean, when it comes to, it depends on the genre, of course, but if it's like, well, mastering, again, it can be anything. It could be dialogue. So yes, of course, if it's just dialogue, of course you high pass. But if it's like a EDM track, we do high pass, but not more than, like the cutoff point would be like 25 hertz, and it will be like not a steep curve. It will be a very kind of smooth curve.
Yeah.
So,
and I guess that's the reason why we do that. It's pretty much to free up some of the room in the
master bus. Yeah, you can gain like a couple of dBs of loudness.
Yep.
If the client really wants the master as loud, then we can just save a few dBs there.
Exactly.
Nobody will hear that.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, the low end. I mean, on a recording it can go as low as sometimes 40 hertz, but
yeah.
I would say that below that it hardly makes any difference in real life, doesn't it?
Yeah, I mean, just for the clubs, we tend not to filter as high just because they have huge systems. So maybe you will never hear it, but you will feel it. So we try not to deprive the song of this low end when it gets played to a club.
That is a great way of putting it. Next question, Aaron.
Cool, sure thing. The next one comes from Keith Veron, who asks, I would love to know how to utilize the Fletcher Munson curve better during mixing and mastering to get things louder and punchier.
All right, I think that deserves just a little bit of explanation. What is the Fletcher Munson curve? Back in the days of studying the telephone and how to get the signal across long lines of wires, the Bell Laboratories made some studies. Now, some of the studies included what are the best frequencies to be reproduced, what really makes speech be understood, and pretty much it is a bit level dependent, but the ear will respond better to anything that's between 1K and 3K, and that has to do with how big their ear canal is. If you took an ear canal and you blew into it like that, it would make a note, which is, depending on how big you are or your ear canal is, it will be somewhere between 1K and 3K. So you will have a little bump in the frequencies right there. And that's why we have developed speech the way we have, because the sounds are better heard by our ear. And so our understanding of sounds is enhanced around those frequencies, which means if we want to make something louder, we don't necessarily have to get everything louder. We can just increase the mid frequencies, which is where the important information is to humans. Anyways, unless you're mixing for dogs, in which case you might want to be careful what you do with your higher frequencies. I mean, you can get lots of documentation about this online. I hope I got my quotations right, but yeah, that's what it is. Oh, one more thing: the louder you get, the less the Fletcher Munson curve.
The curve becomes flatter. It's sort of it flattens out, and you get sort of a more balance across the frequency response of your ear.
Which is another reason why when you blast things loud, they sound better, because the curve changes a little bit, doesn't it?
Yeah.
All right, next question.
Okay, our next question comes from another one of our regular customers who we all love here, Sumbi, who
Ooh,
asks,
Sambi. Hold on.
Dude, that's low.
Yes.
he's where that comes from. He's a good friend of ours. He asks, with the internet today, can we make it without a signed deal with a record label? What are the odds?
Guys, I'm sorry if I have to talk again about this
I
one.
think you do.
it's
I think
okay.
you're the one to take this.
All right. Okay. The time where you would go to a big record label and they would sign you for a big contract and make you a star, that thing is pretty much gone. Maybe you can get that if you sign with a TV show like the X Factor, if you're lucky enough, or something like that, and then you sign pretty much your life away to them in exchange for about 1 year of fame, and that's gonna be the end of it. For maybe some of them have longer careers, but when we talk about real life for us musicians, us artists, there are so many resources online. You have to become your own label because the middleman is disappearing pretty much with the internet, and also independent musicians make more interesting art, and on the internet you have all of the resources you need to make your music available to everyone. You just have to make sure your music is interesting, and you have to make sure that you communicate it right. Because, and plus you can't escape from who you are. So just be an extreme version of yourself. Be active on the internet. Put your music out. Don't think too much. Don't think, 1 year before releasing a track because it's not perfect. Just release it. Just release it. It's no use going 1 dB more, 1 dB less on the kick drum. That's completely useless, because what people are going to get of you is your music and your essence, and that's gonna come across even if your kick drum is 1 dB less or 1 dB more. That it's about you, it's about the song, it's about your communication. I wouldn't wait for labels to sign you. Don't wait for labels to sign you. They probably will say no. They will say no until you're too big for them to be signed. So it's a stupid game anyway. I run a successful label, so we work with artists from all across the world, and we see the ones who are successful, like MC Magic. Look at his work. He's got 1 million, 2 million views on his YouTube channel per video.
That's a hell of a lot.
Yeah.
And Max Barsky.
Yeah.
Completely independent guy from Russia. He's huge. Each one of his videos get 2, 3, 4 million.
Yeah.
He's completely independent. He comes to us. We mix his music. We remix his music. It's independent. There are no bigger labels. Of course, we work for the bigger labels, and it's great if you can work with the bigger labels and if you know how to deal with the bigger labels. But I think that the art lays with independent artists.
Yeah, and to be fair, I mean, it's very obvious sometimes. Sometimes we get mixes from clients, and immediately that there's something special about that track. Immediately, I mean, for MC Magic, we could tell straight away from the very first track.
Let's be fair, you could tell straight away before.
Yeah, I
us.
love MC Magic, I admit.
You really could tell that in advance. Of course, I mean, once you pointed that out.
The very first time I heard to the multi-track, I was like, wow, that's really, it will go well. We didn't know him by then, but wow.
Yeah, that's true. So, have you got anything to add to that, Aaron?
Yeah, I think that's probably the case with a lot of bands, that their first album necessarily doesn't sound as good, but there's a vibe and an atmosphere and an energy that you pick up from it. So even if you go back and listen to, say, Thrice, they got really big and really popular in a certain scene, their first album sounds horrible, but the songs are great. And you just pick up on that, and people sort of get onto that, and they're like, oh, okay, cool, well, the next album's going to sound better, and the next album's going to sound even better. it's all about the song rather than how it sounds.
Yeah.
Fantastic. I couldn't have said that better. Do we have more time for one more question? I don't think we do.
I'm afraid we're running out of time.
Yes. Well, luck. Too bad. Well, get in touch with Dr. Mix. Visit us on www.drmix.com. We can really help you with your mixing and mastering and production. And also remember to subscribe to our mailing list, because we offer pretty good deals, and we also make our content available there before everywhere else. So thank you very much, and I guess see you next time.